Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny Nierenberg. I'm president and co-founder of Food Tank. I'll be moderating this session. I want to thank the Resilience Hub for hosting us. We're going to have a conversation on climate resilience for a nourishing, regenerative, equitable future. And I think we all understand that our food and agriculture systems play a central role in creating that more sustainable, equitable future. But we need solutions that are cross-cutting to help us break down silos, that uplift everyone while protecting the health of the planet. And that's why I'm so excited to have this discussion. I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers, and then we'll dive into discussion. So we have Roy Steiner, the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. We have Fabricio Moriano, who is the co-founder of Instituto Regenera. We have Joshua Gilbert, who is an indigenous consultant, agriculturist, and innovator who serves as a board member of Indigenous Business Australia and the Australian Conservation Foundation. We have Francine Xavier, who is the co-founder and director of Comida do Amana, and Rosina Mubanya, who is the country director in Kenya at Belém. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. So, Roy, I'd love to start with you. The Rockefeller Foundation has made a really big bet on regenerative school meals. And I'm wondering if you can talk about why you think that school meals can really transform our food and agriculture systems.
Great. Hi, Danny. So, before being at the Rockefeller Foundation, I actually worked at the Gates Foundation for a long time, and we spent a lot of effort building supply chains and working on that end. But so many of those projects did not survive or didn't have the impact we wanted because they weren't connected to demand.
Right.
And I think this supply-demand connection is so critical if you want sustainability. And one of the exciting things in the world right now is the fact that the School Meals Coalition, the most successful coalition of the Food System Forum, has expanded now to 114 countries. There's a real political momentum to increase school meals, really modeled in many ways on Brazil and it's what the impact that Brazil has had. And so this creates this opportunity to connect demand to the food system transformation everybody's talking about. We can talk about resilient food, climate-resistant food, but if farmers can't sell their product, we're not going to create the change we want. So that's one of the main reasons.
Uh-huh.
The second thing is, we're doing a lot of research. Asking you to put the mic closer. We're doing a lot of research on the impact of climate change on school meals. So today I'm happy to announce that the Stanford University will be releasing a report showing specifically how climate change is affecting school meal programs in the world. And what they're showing is that climate change is increasing costs. Those costs in the last few years have resulted in a million kids not being able to be fed because an increased cost. But because we're not moving to more regenerative systems, 7 or 8 million children aren't able to be fed as a result of the climate impact. So, but the good news is if we can shift our food systems to be more regenerative,
Right.
those will create a more resilient system, will create hopefully in the long term, lower cost systems, and more children will be fed. And that, so school meals is not just feeding kids, which is important, but it's also a climate solution. And here at COP, we want to illustrate that. People need to see the impact of climate solutions on their lives, and what better way to show impact than to show how it improves their children's health and nutrition.
Absolutely. Roy, one of the things I like about the Regenerative School Meals program so much is that there's a huge focus on well-being. We heard conversations earlier today in this hub about well-being. Can you talk about what this means for transforming both farmers' lives and children's lives?
Sure. So we've seen multiple cases where, when you introduce school meals, the nutritional capability, nutritional status of those kids go up. And to a large extent, in many places in the world, that is the most nutritious meal they have that day. and that's important if you want to build the intellectual
Right.
software of the intellectual capital of a country. So that's one thing, and that's well documented. It also sets the pattern for the entire lifetime of that child, and we're seeing that if you're eating ultra processed foods, child, you're being obese, you've increased it by almost 100%. So we've got to get ultra processed foods out of school meals. Is when you connect to local farmers, and Brazil is the example
Right.
of amazing research that shows you really do make a difference in the incomes of those farmers. You really do make a difference in the connectivity of those communities to their schools.
Right.
So it really is a win-win if you do it right.
It's a lot of wins. I love it. Francine, if I can turn to you, Roy has been speaking so eloquently about the success of Brazil. Can you talk about the work that you're doing here on school meals?
Oh, of course. We at Comida do Amanhã work with public policies and cities. And after 5 years of programs and projects aiming to improve the food policies, we launched the School Meals Initiative. And this School Meals Initiative, it aims to make the agroecological transition of family farming to help them to connect with that transition. And we do that exploring incentives and mechanisms, institutional arrangements through the School Meals program. So the School Meals program will drive the transformation. And I think that we are just start this project this year, but we are now with 11 cities working on that with their agricultures, and we are in 4 states. We are in Pará, here. We are in Rio Grande do Sul, which is in the south of Brazil, Paraná, which is in the south too, and Pernambuco, which is in the northeast. So we want to understand the whole scene of Brazil and what we need to do to really deliver this transformation in an agroecological transition.
And when you talk about this agroecological transition, what does that mean for farmers economically? And how do you sort of, I don't know a better word to say this, sell it to them so that they understand that they won't be losing money, that they'll be making money?
Yeah, I think that for them, it's first for their health, because the agroecological farming, it's way better for their health, for the health of the planet, and for the health for the kids. So first for their health, and after that, I think that we can make a model where they are more included and where they can make a better money too.
Absolutely. Rosina, you're seeing similar work happening in Kenya, and you've really said that we need to center smallholder farmers at, in the center of these school meal programs. Can you talk about what you're seeing with the communities you work with?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, the small-scale farmers are feeding all of us. From the research I've seen is that a third of the food we eat comes from the smallholder farmers, and they contribute about 84% of the world food. And this is a similar case in Kenya. They form a lot of food that we eat, and they continue to be very vulnerable. And one of the things we have also plugged into is also the school meals discussion, because we also believe that we need local markets that are shorter for the climate, so that the farmers don't have to do a lot of efforts to transport a lot of food very far, and at the same time, in the same localities, they can contribute to the food that their own children are eating in schools. And particularly for us, we are looking at regenerative and agroecological foods to ensure that children, yes, they are getting the nutrition. The farmers are also improving their livelihoods, because it's very discouraging if farmers don't have really good markets. And we are doing this with linking them to off-takers so that it's also sustainable, and at the same time setting up of school gardens so that in the future they can have something, even if it's vegetables for one day or whichever number of days they can manage. So it's a very sustainable model, and I think the platform of using networks works so that we are able to scale up some of these best practices.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if you can talk about why an organization like Pelham is central to this work, why it's important to have Pelham and other farmers' organizations involved.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, Pelham Kenya being a network of organizations, 69 of them, we are reaching a lot of smallholder farmers. Particularly, we have around 1.2 million smallholder farmers in Kenya. And with the network, we have the numbers to influence policies, to speak about issues that affect the smallholder farmers. And I'm very happy that just in 2024, we launched the National Agroecological Strategy for Kenya for food systems transformation. And this has created a lot of momentum. A lot of counties in Kenya, 47 counties in total in Kenya, but out of that, around 11 are already advancing or at advanced stages of ensuring they have the agroecological strategies in their counties. Actually, like 4 of them already have launched their strategies, and network becomes very important. At the same time, we hold a lot of networking activities. We have just held our national networking symposium in July. And this brings together many actors to also discuss the issues that we are talking about: food systems, researchers being part of the discussion, private sector, academia, all of them we are able to discuss, and this brings a lot of momentum. The other thing is in terms of scaling up best practices. We are able to scale up best practice because we provide a platform for knowledge management to ensure that we are getting all this, what is coming out from the ground, and we are able to document. And I would say one of the best practices that we have comfortably scaled up is the bioinputs in Kenya. Like, let's say 5 years ago, the bioinputs were not as much known as in the country as it is. But now we have, for instance, the bokashi, which is gaining a lot of impact and knowledge. And some of the farmers, not only on food crops, but even on cash crops, they are doing a lot of good successes. We are seeing a lot of increased production, and at the same, they are contributing to soil health, biodiversity protection, and also reducing the climate crisis.
And they're receiving support from their counterparts, other farmers. That's really important. On that point, Fabricio and Joshua, I'm wondering if you can talk about how school meal programs create that stability for farmers and ranchers and other food producers, and why it's important that they are organized in a way that, helps them make these strides together.
Well, we used to work with the farmers in here in Belém since 2020, specifically helping them operate with scaling up and opening new markets and so on. So all of a sudden, we understood that we had a mind of someone from São Paulo, a place where you have much more money, much more public that is kind of prepared to consume organic and agroecological food. And when you go to smaller cities, the main economical actor is the state, is like the public purchase programs. They really drive the change. So if you prepare those farmers to be ready to deliver in there, not only the food is reaching like the people who most need, because when you go to regular markets, normally organic and agroecological food is a premium product. But if you send it to public school meals, I mean, it's reaching exactly the population we want them to be reached.
Right.
So, and the thing that the metaphor that I use all the time is like, when you have a boat, a truck that is bringing the food to school meals, they can also deliver to the local market right close to it, or they can feel that it's their space too, just as Rede Bragantina, one of the networks that is working in this restaurant you can eat in here, Restaurante da Sócio Bio, because they have their own space in the city, and they are improving the market themselves by accessing other policies before. That's the type of things we try to translate to them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. And Matt, first, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging country and pay my respects to elders past and present on these lands. And I want to make a special mention to my lands at home. So my family have been farming the same lands for the last 60,000 years, and we have a deep commitment to make sure that we can continue farming for the next 60,000 years. And for me, that's really rooted in our way of protecting and preserving country. So want to make a special mention to my Mororai brothers and sisters. For us, we don't have a schools program in Australia, but the opportunity does come up in other ways. And there's kind of three big areas where I think we haven't really hit the mark. We're very early in these conversations in Australia, but we do have things like defence spend, we do have jails, and we do have hospitals, all of which are also looking for meals. We're yet to really crack the nut on making sure that those opportunities exist. But I think from a farmer perspective, what it does do is it enable a really localized market where those services are happening in a really small scale, just being able to roll out the opportunity at that really local level. We actually have a lot more opportunity to be able to make sure that that's seasonal, we're able to supply, and also get an idea on where the supply chain needs to be. So if you can forward plan some of that things, we can also have much better markets for farmers. Mm-hmm. But we can also make sure that we're planning proactively for our futures as well,
right.
and being able to do all the heavy lifting and the juggling, making sure that we can adapt to climate change as well in a really progressive sense, because we have this forward contract and we know what we need to order.
Absolutely. And I think that's the sort of point. You're putting these contracts in place. They're long-term, they're stable, but it sounds really easy. Like, of course, farmers need long-term, stable markets for their food, but there are policies that are necessary to enact that. So, Francine, I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the policies that are necessary to move these things forward.
I think we have many policies in Brazil, that food policies, they are very powerful. The food procurement is one of them. The school meals program, the National Schools Meals Program, it's a very powerful one, and it's celebrated all over the world. And we do have challenges to figure out, to face, to include more the indigenous and the traditional communities, to connect with the agroecological transition, all that. But the program, it's already set. And one thing that it's nice is that when you involve the civil society, it gets like a program that you cannot take off anymore. You know, you cannot quit it anymore.
Right.
So people know that they have it and they want it and they want to participate on that. And I think that in Brazil we have many other policies like the food acquisition program, which is a larger one with the for the policy for the government to buy the food for all the hospitals and other projects. And we have many, like the agriculture, urban agriculture and peri-urban. We have food banks. We have many public policies that help to make the transformation of food systems. And our work is to work with municipalities to help them to understand these policies, these food policies, in a systemic way, in an intersectorial way, with coherence, with participatory, in a participatory way, including the civil society. And we focus on the territory because Brazil is a very big country. Okay. And sometimes a policy that it's designed to São Paulo or for Rio de Janeiro doesn't fit in Amazon, like with big distance and all that.
Sure. Roy, I wonder if you can comment on this point. You know, municipalities have so much power when it comes to procurement and working with small-scale farmers. Where in other parts of the world are you seeing that procurement strategy come from cities and villages themselves to really uplift farmers and create these nutritious school meals?
Well, all over the world. I mean, even the United States. It's a very distributed school meals program in the U.S. And one of the best examples is, the 12 cities of the United States, 12 largest urban centers in the United States got together. They were frustrated that they didn't have the right bargaining power, and they were getting sold, actually not very healthy chicken, for
Right.
example, full of antibiotics. We know how terrible antibiotics are for children, actually, to have that embedded in our meat supply. And so they gathered together and they said, we are not going to buy we're going to buy antibiotic-free chicken only. They were actually sued by Tyson, the biggest chicken fan, right? Because that would require too much. It was difficult for them. They lost, and then they shifted the entire chicken supply chain of the United States. You can buy antibiotic-free chicken now in almost every supermarket, and that's because school meals they're the largest purchaser of chicken nuggets in the U.S. apparently. So maybe not the very, but at least it's antibiotic-free, right?
Sure.
And then that's the power of these. In Kenya, schools have started purchasing high iron beans, and that's created a market, and that's potentially 10 to 20% of all the beans purchased in the country.
Wow.
So you can really, it's not all the market, but 10 to 20% is enough to drive change.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to. Where can we drive that change? Find the collective buying power. And I think a lot of cities have that power because they're able to move quicker. They're more entrepreneurial than a lot of federal agencies, and I think a lot of that's coming out of. And Brazil is another great example of is that Comida is working with.
Right. Fabricio, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from cities all over Brazil?
Sure. Well, one thing I could say is that we are in the Amazon, but if you look at the details of implementation in the cities, like they truly have to have the good example, such as the exchanges they promote in Lupa, in Instituto Comida do Amanhã. And I'll give you one example that I really loved getting to know in place. I mean, the Rockefeller at a certain point asked us for a report on PNI, like the National Plan of School Meals in Brazil. So we gave 5 examples, and one of them was the city of Jundiaí. 20 years back, they didn't have enough producers for leaves for the school meals. So they decided to build their own garden. So it's a public garden that is dealt with by the public administration. And now another institution working with the city administration developed a program for non-traditional plants that we can eat. They tried more than 200 species in this garden, and 36 were stable enough to be a good source for the schools. But how can you teach children to eat a purple leaf?
Sure.
I mean, I have a small daughter. It's quite hard.
Right.
And so they have different strategies for that. And the one that I like the most is that if they plant, they much more easily eat. So they are now developing programs to visit the area and plant together, and to have small gardens inside the schools where they can plant some of them. So it tends to make things easier, but it only gets better. The cherry of the cake in the end is that at a certain point of the year, they take the harvest at home. So all of those parents who don't necessarily eat that well, don't have that much time to cook, they're having fresh food coming from their children, and the ideas are reaching the parents. So that's one example. We have hundreds, if not thousands, in the cities here in Brazil. So we have to, put the spot on these kinds of things and show that it's possible.
Yeah, I love that intergenerational learning, parents learning from their kids. Rosina, we've been talking a lot about farmer stability and how this helps, how regenerative school meals can help create that. But we haven't mentioned women farmers in particular, and they really have to be a key part of school meals. Not only are they typically the nutritional gatekeepers in their communities, but they are also farming the foods that people, the foods that actually nourish people, the vegetables, the beans, the ancient grains. Can you talk about the role women have to play in this?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, women are feeding the world as well. And there are a lot of cultural and other systemic barriers that continue to affect women. And like a month ago, we just had a women activity in Kenya, and we were trying to just have a conversation with women and even some youth. And I would want to talk about two stories that really moved me, and I'm still contemplating about them. I met this young lady who apparently she decided to do chicken value chain, and at that point she talked with the father, and the father was able to allocate some space at home to be able to do this chicken rearing. But this is in Western Kenya, and the cultural issues there are very deep-rooted. And after a while, when the business is just picked, the father comes and tells the daughter, you know what, from the conversation we are having as a family, it seems you have to stop this business. Ideally, you are taking all the blessings
Sure.
of my sons. And this lady went ahead and rented a house. This is a true story. She went ahead, rented some place in the neighborhood, and after a while, the father came and talked to the landlord and said, this girl has to stop this business. So she had, that time we were having the forum, she had been given a notice of up to December to vacate from this place. And our business had already been picking. So that is a very deep-rooted culture. At the same time, we have a project, one of the project, and when I received the report from the project field officer, she told me one of the challenges is that the head of the family is unwell. He's hospitalized, and in that community, the man has to be the first to hit the ground if you are to farm.
Wow.
So it means this season they cannot plant until the man is well. So we are dealing with very deep-rooted systemic and cultural issues. At least we have had a few success stories of women who have really overcome these barriers of their own rights to land, access to resources. At least we are reaching somewhere, but it needs a lot of awareness. It needs a lot of, the policies are there, even the Constitution of Kenya and the land policies are very clear on the equal rights and access for women, but on the ground, things are different. So
Sure.
we have these Africa Women Leaders in Agroecology where we try to provide a platform, safe spaces for women to talk, and even we are trying to link up with some legal firms so that some of these issues might be followed up legally. But it's really a big challenge in addressing food security and livelihoods, particularly for women and youth. We also have a project on rights, land rights, representation, and access that we are also working on. But the issues of land rights are very deep rooted in the cultures and some of the things that are happening on the ground. Yeah, but at the same time, we have a lot of stories from women who have been able to overcome these barriers and are finding themselves in ways in which they can talk to others. Actually, the mentorship and coaching approach works because we are able to ensure others are trying to work on the same challenges that they passed and overcoming those challenges.
Sure. I think it's important that we bring up the opportunity for youth that school meal programs can create. And Joshua, I'm hoping you can comment on this first, because you're working with indigenous farmers who may feel left out. They might feel like they're not being listened to and that they don't see agriculture as necessarily a career option. Can you talk about how school programs can help them feel like they have something, that they have something that they'll eventually make money from?
Yeah, so we live by the motion that you can't be what you can't see. And if you can't see an Indigenous farmer proactively promoted in any of our agricultural comms, then you're not likely to step in as an agricultural farmer going forward. So we have a huge kind of challenge around how we portray Indigenous farmers in Australia. We often see Indigenous farmers as very fixated in culture, that we can only farm traditional foods that we've been doing for 60,000 years, and that we actually hadn't adapted into the last 200 years of our agricultural narrative. That's one of the big challenges that I see, and certainly something we're trying to address. So one of the big things we've done just recently is redefine what is Indigenous agriculture in Australia.
yeah.
And we've done that to say an Indigenous person farming whatever they want to farm is an Indigenous farmer. And therefore, if it's an Indigenous farmer farming native foods, then that meets the criteria. Or if it's an Indigenous person farming beef cattle, that also meets the criteria. So that's the challenge that we have. The other challenge that we have, actually, we've just done some research and we've tracked our census that's happened over the last 4 periods, so the last 16 years. Indigenous youth actually enter agriculture at really high rates. In fact, 4 times higher in Australia than non-Indigenous kids. They enter really high at the ages of 15 to 20, stick around from 20 to 25, and at the age of 25, they all drop out.
Wow.
Like this massive exodus, and there's no retention in the industry over a long period of time. We think, obviously, racism is the big thing that exists in there, but the other thing that's really challenging is land ownership. So we actually see the non-Indigenous population getting older and older over those 4 census periods, and Indigenous youth dropping out. And we think until we can get Indigenous land ownership and more back on farm, we're not actually going to have the opportunity.
Yeah, and that farmers aging out of agriculture is a problem all over the world. Are there policies or practices that you all see that can help young people, again, see regenerative school meal programs as an opportunity? Roy, I know you have to leave soon, so maybe I go to you first.
Actually, I mean, you've been doing this a lot, so you're in the better position to answer that question.
Yeah.
And I got some time.
Again, one thing that I can say is that we have to consider the school communities the way they actually are. They are part of the decision makers. That means if you don't take them together with the process of changing the way you apply school meals, they can be a very important veto actor. Here in Brazil, we have to have more than 90% of acceptance of food. Otherwise, it could be considered as food waste. So you have to have campaigns to bring them together. That's the reason why I brought this story on how you can, plant with them, harvest with them, and then they learn and they bring the culture at home. But the thing that is, in my opinion, the most challenging is how can you do that in the other part, in the production side, which is saying to the young people that that's also fancy, that's sexy, that's really necessary, because we often see the migration of the young population to the cities. So the campaigns we are trying to build now, specifically on the transition for agroecological production, is saying, no, there is opportunity in here, there will be quality of life in here, and I'm not mentioning a big quantity of examples because we are still trying to build how can we actually show that this is an option of life again, and not seeing as a second option or something that only my parents do and I don't want to do it anymore.
Sure.
So, and I'll add on to that. One of the interesting things that we're exploring right now is the power of school-based demonstration farms and gardens. And there's been a lot of that in the round. But when we just came across this amazing study that looked at, they did a randomized controlled trial in Liberia where 25 schools did a school-based demonstration farms where extension agents were involved, and then 25 areas where it was just regular extension. The places where they did it through school-based extension, the farmers adopted regenerative practices 2 to 3 times more often than in regular extension. So part of this is we have to have a more integrated way of educating. And when you're using, you can use those for teaching biology and chemistry. You can bring AI and technology and get people excited about how do you think about this in a new way. And turns out kids talk to their parents and are quite convincing, apparently. And parents come and take a look, and it's a very different dynamic than if they have this extension agent just talking to them, and they can ignore the extension agent. They don't ignore their kids for some reason. So I understand that. 4 kids, 4 grandchildren. and they're very convincing in forcing me to adapt to their desires. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Francine, I don't know if you want to comment on this as well.
Yeah, I think that here in Brazil we still have a culture that the agriculture, the farming, it's not a very profitable work. So I think one thing that we need to do is make it profitable for the smallholders too, and give them machines adapted for their activities, give them help to improve it, and to make it sexy. Like
Right.
I come from the gastronomy, and like when I start to work with gastronomy, like 30 years ago, it was like my father said, "How come you're going to work
Sure.
with gastronomy? How come?" It was not sexy as it is today.
Right.
So maybe we can make the same transformation and make it make the farmers have the place that they are supposed to have, because they feed us. The small farmers, they are the ones.
So we need to have both celebrity chefs and celebrity farmers.
Farmers,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
They don't live without each other.
That's great. Joshua, I want to turn back to you. Indigenous farmers in Australia face some very, as you mentioned before, systemic challenges, whether it's racism or lack of access to markets. When we're talking about youth and we're talking about women farmers, what kind of policies does Australia need to instill to uplift those farmers in the way they need to be uplifted?
So we actually have a really good policy that we haven't really enacted yet in Australia, particularly for agriculture. We have in a whole range of other sectors. But we have a policy called the Indigenous Procurement Policy, which mandates that all government spend, 3% of all of that spend should go to an Indigenous business, and any contract under $250,000 should automatically be offered to an Indigenous business through a competitive process. So it's not completely just handed, but there is a process there. We haven't touched that in agriculture yet. So we're yet to really look at these bigger opportunities and say, how do we actually enact and enable Indigenous farmers through that supply chain? One of the issues is we don't actually know how many Indigenous farmers there are in Australia. There's no way of actually calculating that and how many Indigenous family farms we have. I've just worked on that on my PhD that I'm doing, and we think there might be about 50, which is exciting. It's a number. So at least we've got some opportunities there, but then it's around connecting the dots and making sure that those opportunities exist.
Absolutely.
So we need to start doing that work. The other challenge is we don't have a lot of Indigenous people in the sector generally. So there's less than 6,000 Indigenous people working in agriculture right across Australia. And there are literally just a handful of those that have a master's or a PhD in agriculture or are doing the course now. Most of us are doing the course. So there's a massive opportunity around how do you actually embed thought leadership and that kind of practice as well. The other challenge is we don't have enough young people coming through the graduate process either. So less than 5 Indigenous graduates graduate with a university degree across all of Australia doing agriculture, which is just fascinating, like less than 5 every year. So we're trying to get the pipelines existing for that as well. So we've got the settings. We kind of have a rough idea on how many farmers there are. It's really about connecting the opportunities. And I think when we start doing that and people start seeing that there's a market there, we can actually start backing and investing in Indigenous farmers and actually start growing that 50 number up hopefully into the hundreds.
Absolutely. It's so interesting to me as we talk about all of this that, we've talked about the role of farmers, we've talked about the role of students and educating their parents, but we need eaters who maybe don't have kids but understand the importance of this to their communities to also understand the importance of school meals. How do we do that in a better way than we have?
Economically, it's an enormous drive. But I'll give you the example, trying to connect until our colleague from Australia. So we have had policies in Brazil that apply for 30% prioritization for family farming, a premium for agroecological production inside the school meals. And that is, for a fact, an economical drive. But what happened in here is saying, look, we do it every day, so why not doing it at COP?
Right.
And there is a restaurant for that,
Right.
okay? So that was our strategy. That was the way we argued with the government to say, to do the same in here. So next year, we want to understand what Australia does specifically on that subject. It's very good to know that you already have a 3%. And when we were fighting for this now 30%, they asked us several times, but can they really feed 30% of COP? And we said, no, we can feed 100% of COP, but you can start with the 30%. So we should not start with the 3%, but we definitely have a standpoint saying, look, we do it every day. So why not doing it in other places, even in private places? Because it's possible, you know. You can foster other types of economies, other types of environmental outcomes. So that's one of the ways or strategies we are trying to build on top of.
I love it. That's great. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to leave you all with a call to action to the audience who is here in person and watching online. Roy, you have to leave. Do you want to do your call to action first?
I build regenerative requirements into procurement systems everywhere. I mean, that would be, and then sell it based on the fact that it's going to save people money, it's going to make people healthier, but you need to drive that, and that has to be intentional.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Roy. Joshua.
So mine would be we need diversity in all senses, not just the diversity in what we farm or where we farm, but also the diversity of who's farming.
Right. Diversity of practice, diversity of people, diversity of thought. I love it. Francine.
I think that what we should all do is the agroecological transition. We need an agroecological planet.
Absolutely.
Better for the planet and for us too, for all the people, all the livers. I don't know, the people that is alive.
It's all connected.
Yeah, all connected.
Wonderful. Fabricio.
If you are a food systems advocate, put your mouth where your heart is and really bring the food. That's the best argument. We were just talking before. You always remember a specific thing he bought in a store that we got to know in there. This memory remains. So bring the food.
Thank you so much. Rosina, you get the last word. Thank you, Roy.
I think for me, the small-scale farmers have to be at the core of what we do because they are feeding the world and they continue to be vulnerable. So let us put systems that are able to empower them because even and reflect on how the regenerative and agroecological food has transformed. Initially, a lot of agroecological regenerative food was being sold at very high-end markets,
Right.
which is a human right issue, actually. So the local markets are helping the smallholder farmers in a way and also enhancing the human rights. So let's stand up for the small-scale farmers and have their rights defended.
Absolutely. Stand up for farmers. Please thank our panelists. Another round of applause. Bye, Roy. And thank you to the Resilience Hub for hosting us. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.